Hi everyone, today I've got another Chinese electric bike on my table, and this time is the LOTDM200-II. If you don't mind, I won't be repeating its full name because it's just impossible to remember and quite a mouthful to pronounce, but the bike itself is truly unforgettable. It has so many features that really convinced me. This was one of those tests that I really enjoyed doing again because I got a really great product to review. So as usual, just like you're used to, there will be a bit of unboxing and assembly. Then we'll go over the specifications. And of course, at the end, I'll tell you again what it's like to use this bike, who I recommend it for, and what I recommend it for. So let's get to the unboxing. It arrives in a big box, but despite that, we're talking about a relatively lightweight bicycle. Obviously, this particular bicycle features a robust aluminum frame, and if my memory serves me correctly, its net weight is approximately 24 kilograms, which truly isn't very much at all for a high-performance bike of this specific type. So let's just say it's almost entirely portable. Almost everything is already installed on it. The front wheel comes separately. You have to insert the handlebar along with the stem into its place, put the seat in position, and attach the front fender and the front light. Once you've done all that, the bike is basically ready to go. Of course, you still have to do the usual things like adjusting the brakes. On this bike, nothing needed to be adjusted at the back, so there were no issues there. We only had to adjust the brakes, and then we were ready for a test ride. So that's all there is to the unboxing, and that's all there is to the assembly. It's as simple as can be. If you have even a minimal basic sense for technical things, you'll be able to do it. Let's quickly move on to the specifications then. Well, obviously we're talking about an electric bicycle. Obviously we're talking about a rear hub motor bicycle. Of course, this is a brushless motor, just like in every bike of this kind, exactly the same. What truly makes this particular bike special is that compared to the 250 to 300 watt bikes we've generally gotten used to lately, this one impressively has a powerful 750 watt motor, which is absolutely awesome. And what's really great is that this 750 watt motor has a maximum torque of 36 Newton meters, which is also really awesome. And another really important thing to consider is the battery, which is a 48 volt and 13 amp hour unit. That's not quite as awesome as some others. A 13 amp hour battery isn't exactly huge, especially not for a 750 watt motor, which typically demands more power. Of course, there's a gear shifter, the usual Shimano shifter. Back here, this is a tour derailleur, so it's the usual entry-level derailleur. But that doesn't matter much because the torque actually comes from the motor in the rear wheel, so we don't have to transfer the torque through the chain and the derailleur. So in my opinion, this inexpensive derailleur is absolutely suitable for bikes like this. We have 7 gears, if I remember correctly. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's right. We have 7 gears. We have lights. There's a light in the front and in the back. We don't have turn signals. What's great is that the rear light is connected to the electrical system, just like the front one. So the rear light also works as a brake light. Another very important feature is the front shock absorber, which is not adjustable. It has a preset tension, but it can be locked. This means it's well suited for use on hard surfaces, like asphalt or paving stones. And it also works well off-road. The manufacturer claims that there is both front and rear suspension, which is true in the sense that we have a shock absorber at the front, but there isn't one at the back. However, under this seat at the rear, there is a component that could be described as a spring element of some sort, and the seat itself is also quite soft. So from this perspective, I think it's fair to say that we have front suspension, and the rear is more of a spring mechanism. The handlebar height is adjustable, and the seat height is adjustable as well. Well, I think that's about it. Okay, so let's talk a bit about the exterior before I get into my experiences. We've now gone through the specifications. What should you know? Well, it's worth knowing that we have a pretty nice handlebar, a nice wide handlebar. As you can clearly see, on the right side there's the gear shifter, the throttle, and of course a brake lever. On the left side, we have a brake lever, a horn, and a control cluster that lets us operate various functions and features. With these 2 buttons, we can change the gear and adjust the level of assistance. With this We can turn it on. You can probably see the little foot icon at the bottom here. We can activate the walking mode. There's a headlight switch, a power button, and an information button. What's interesting is that we have a relatively large color display. This large color display can be turned on with NFC. This is what it looks like. Unfortunately, it's not very visible in sunlight, but what's pretty good is that it's large in size, and the tilt angle is adjustable so you can tweak it while riding to minimize sun glare as much as possible. What else should you know about it? Of course, you can also turn it on with this power button. At that point, you have to enter the code, which, if I remember correctly, the factory code is 1212, but you can check this and it's basically almost irrelevant. You can also turn it off with NFC. Another important thing is, as I mentioned, there's this I, the info button. With the info button, we can switch between displays. For example, here you can see that the battery voltage was 49.2 volts, which is great because it's much better than those green bars, since you can actually see when the voltage will drop so low that you won't be able to ride the bike anymore. If we switch over, you can clearly see the current power consumption here. You can also see the total time elapsed since first turning it on, the precise distance that has been traveled, and a whole bunch of other relevant things. That's basically all there is to it. You can also turn it off. So it looks really good and is very user-friendly. I also really like this particular cable tie part on it, which isn't the usual spiral thing they typically use to bundle cables, but rather a robust Velcro strap with the company name prominently displayed on it, which is actually pretty unusual. I don't know if you were aware of that. I always try to read it as one single word, like SAMEBIKE or something similar to that, but it turns out it's actually SAMEBIKE. In the end, it makes perfect sense. Let's move on. I really like the paint job, and I really like the lettering. Everything looks really good. By the way, I think the paint job on the bike itself turned out really well. I really like this gray color. It has a bit of a metallic touch to it. At the back, of course, there's a disc brake, and it's a mechanical disc brake. And at the front, again, there's a disc brake, and it's also a mechanical disc brake. The front light is a very bright and powerful projector lamp, and the rear light is just a completely standard yet fully functional one. I'll turn it on now. This is exactly how it looks when illuminated, and here's the clearly visible brake light on it. We have fenders both at the front and the back. It's true that these aren't metal but plastic fenders, but I think they do their job well. Here's the gear shifter, which is a 7-speed. This is precisely what I was talking about. And prominently positioned up front, there's also the highly functional and easily lockable, as well as smoothly openable advanced shock absorber, and that's pretty much how the entire bike visually looks. What's interesting, by the way, is that the seat looks like a big, soft, comfortable one. To be honest, I personally didn't really like this particular seat design with its upward curving rear part, but perhaps you will like it, so I won't definitively say whether it's good or bad. Personally, I just didn't find it that appealing. The pedals are made of metal, which might also be quite important to note. And that's pretty much all there really is to say about this particular bicycle. So now we can finally move on to what it was actually like to truly use this bicycle in real-world conditions. Well, basically, you think this is a city bike because at first glance, it looks like a city bike. It has a really nice, sturdy luggage rack, which I think is a huge plus. And thank God, with most Chinese bicycles these days, even if it's not a basic requirement, we're seeing more and more of these racks installed at the factory. This is a big step forward because, as you know, in the past we only had a front light and that was it. Now, compared to that, most bikes, or at least a lot of them, already have a rear light as well, often connected to the electrical system. Here are the fenders, here's the luggage rack, so you don't have to buy these separately anymore. And I think that's definitely a good thing, a step forward. At least over the years, we're making some progress. So what's it like to actually use the bike? So at first, I thought this would be an absolutely urban bicycle. And I based that on the shape of the frame and this luggage rack. I say the shape of the frame because this tube comes down at a relatively steep angle. It's not the usual solution you see on these fat bikes. Normally, this tube which also houses the battery connects to the frame around here. And from there, there's an extra section that extends down to hold the pedal itself. But on this particular bike, it actually goes all the way down to the very bottom of the frame, and the pedal mechanism is securely attached right here to this specific part. So initially I thought this was more of a typical city bike. However, as it turns out, thanks to the excellent suspension system and the remarkably soft and comfortable seat, this bike is actually quite great for off-road adventures as well. I rode it on forest trails, used it on rougher roads, and it was really comfortable. In fact, I'd even say the front suspension was maybe a bit too soft, which is why it's really good that it can be locked, because on hard paved surfaces, the suspension is just way too soft. So if you're riding on asphalt, it's definitely worth locking it. The bike will be much more stable. However, if you go out into the woods or onto rough roads, feel free to unlock it, because it will be much more comfortable and you won't get shaken up, your wrists won't hurt, and the handlebar and seat won't rattle you. So it's a good thing they designed it this way. One downside might be the size of the battery, because as I mentioned, the motor is 750 watts, which is a relatively powerful motor, but 13 amp hours isn't really a lot for that. Of course, the official specs always list all sorts of impressive numbers about how far you can go. If I remember correctly, with pedal assist, it's 80 kilometers. Without pedal assist, it's 40. I hope I'm remembering that right. Obviously, you can't actually go that far with it. Without any pedal assist, if you truly want to ride normally, you might be able to get about 20 kilometers, but I genuinely think that's really the absolute maximum you can realistically expect. Without pedal assist, if you really pedal hard and the motor barely has to work, maybe you could get 45 or 50, but I think that's still a bit of a cautious or optimistic estimate. So what was it like to ride it? Well, there are two more things I definitely need to talk about. One of them is that this is a relatively cheap bicycle, which means it doesn't have a torque sensor but a pedal sensor. I've already mentioned several times how the pedal sensor system works. Basically, when you start pedaling, the motor kicks in and runs at maximum torque. And when you stop pedaling, the motor stops as well. So we're talking about a kind of analog on-off switch method. You can adjust the level of assistance. Obviously, this only refers to the top speed, meaning at what maximum speed the assistance should turn off. By default, this is set at 25 kilometers per hour, but you can turn it off, and I'll show you how to do that. So to effectively disable the speed limit, you will need to precisely press the plus and minus buttons. Following this action, the service menu will then appear. Within the service menu, you absolutely have to navigate all the way to point 8. Point 8 is where you can set at what speed in kilometers per hour the assistance should turn off. Obviously, this can go up to 100 or more precisely up to 99. The bike will never actually reach 99 kilometers per hour. I think you can probably guess that yourselves. I've now set it to 97, which basically removes the upper limit. So as long as the motor can handle it, the assistance will keep working. And why is this particularly important? Well, it's truly important because this specific bike will definitely be classified as a moped and not as a regular bicycle at all. This distinction is crucial. You see, for bicycles, there's a rule that the assistance has to turn off at 25 kilometers per hour. Even if this particular bike is set to provide assistance up to 25 kilometers per hour, it will still be considered a moped. This is primarily because it has a throttle, so you can easily ride it without pedaling, and also because the motor is 750 watts, which is considerably more powerful than what's generally allowed. So I definitely recommend that, unless you're afraid of speed, you should turn off the 25 km per hour limit on the pedal assist, because it's completely unnecessary. Just because this bike is turned on, it won't become a regular electric bicycle. It will still be classified as an electric pedal assist bicycle. But let's get back to the pedal sensor. So, as I mentioned, this is a cheap bike with a pedal sensor, not a torque sensor. This might suggest that the bike will start off very strongly when you begin to pedal. I don't know why, but nowadays they tend to use these more expensive sine wave controllers on these bikes, and these are sine wave controllers. These are really good because they build up the torque gradually and smoothly. So it's not like you start pedaling and immediately get all 36 Newton meters and 750 watts at once. Instead, there's a slight transition at the start, and this little transition is enough so that you don't feel in danger. So when you're say standing at a crosswalk, or you want to enter a roundabout or cross an intersection and you move the pedal, it shouldn't be that the bike pushes your butt into the traffic with 36 Newton meters right away, but rather that there's a gradual transition. And this bike has that. And that's really good because it makes riding around the city incredibly comfortable and truly pleasant. By the way, just using the throttle, so with the electric drive system, the bike effortlessly accelerated my nearly 100 kilograms up to 41 kilometers per hour on perfectly flat ground, and even on a slight incline. So even if you don't particularly want to pedal, you can still easily go 40. And 40 basically means that, at least here not in Budapest, but in a provincial town, I can quite easily ride among the cars with it. One more truly positive thing I haven't mentioned yet, namely this handle right here in this particular part, which is strategically placed at the bike's center of gravity. And what this means is that you can easily lift the bike, and even though it's relatively heavy, you can still comfortably carry it a bit by holding it at this handle. If you're not very strong, don't try to lift it too much, because it's still quite heavy. But if you fold it up, you can use this convenient handle to fairly easily put it into your car, or even take it onto a commuter train, especially if there's a designated place for bicycles on the train. Let's sum up. So, I like this bike. I don't just like it because it's powerful or because it has relatively high torque, but I also like its design. It's not the usual Chinese fat bike electric style that we've generally gotten used to. It stands out a bit from the crowd, but I really like this design. I like the paintwork, I like the welds, and overall, even at first glance, I got a very positive impression of the bike. We're talking about a well-assembled bike, put together from good quality materials and components. Obviously that's by Chinese standards, because for example, I definitely wouldn't call the Shimano Tourney derailleur a top tier mechanism, especially with this SIS shifter. But as I said, since the torque is in the rear wheel, it actually serves its purpose perfectly. I like this cable management. Overall, the whole bike is really compact, and despite the thick frame and the wide tires, I would almost call it airy. Airy, obviously, I mean, it will never truly be airy, but somehow it still feels much less bulky and beastly than similar fat bike bikes. I won't mention the price here at the end of the video, but if I remember correctly, with the coupon code I provide, you'll be able to get it for about 150,000 to 180,000 forints, less than the regular retail price, which is quite a decent discount. Well, that's it for this video. I think I've covered everything. If you like the bike, check it out in the online store. The link is in the video description along with the coupon code. Of course, I've also written an article about it, so be sure to read that too. You'll find pictures there and maybe a bit more information as well. And subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed the video, and I'll be back with another review soon. Bye!